Warsaw is a city that should not exist today. If you look at old photos from 1945, you do not see a city. You see a desert of broken bricks and dust. Most experts at the time said it was impossible to fix. They thought the city was dead forever, but the people of Poland had a different idea. They decided to bring their capital back to life, stone by stone. This is the story of how a whole nation refused to let their history be erased. It is a story of war, hidden survivors, and a set of old paintings that saved a city. Before 1939, if you told someone you were going to Warsaw, they would likely tell you to bring your finest clothes. People called it the Paris of the North. It was a city of grand theatres, fancy cafes, and beautiful parks. If you walked down the streets, you would see buildings with intricate statues and golden decorations. It was a massive intellectual and artistic hub where people from all over the world came to study and create. The city sat proudly on the Warsaw Vistula River, protected by its symbol, a mermaid with a sword and shield. By 1937, it was home to over 1.3 million people. It was one of the most diverse places in Europe. Nearly 375,000 of its residents were Jewish, making it the largest Jewish community in any city in the world at that time. There was a sense that Warsaw was only going to get bigger and more beautiful. Plans were already being made for a World Fair in 1940. But all of that hope was about to vanish in a cloud of smoke. When the Nazi army invaded in September 1939, they didn't just want to win a war. They wanted to destroy the very idea of Poland. The first big step in destroying Warsaw was to tear its people apart. In October 1940, the Nazis gave a terrifying order. Every Jewish person in the city had to move into a tiny area called the ghetto. They built a wall around it that was 10 feet tall with barbed wire on top. Imagine 400,000 people crammed into a space only about 1.3 square miles big. It was like a giant prison in the middle of a city. Inside the walls, life was a daily battle for food and air. Thousands died every month from hunger and disease. Then, in 1942, the Nazis began the Great Action. They started taking 7,000 people every single day and putting them on trains to a death camp called Treblinka. By 1943, only about 60,000 people were left. They knew the end was coming, so they chose to fight. This was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Even though they had almost no guns, they fought for nearly a month. The Nazis were so frustrated that they decided to burn the entire ghetto down, block by block. When the smoke cleared, that whole part of the city was gone. It was just a flat field of ash. By 1944, the rest of the people in Warsaw were ready to fight back too. On August 1st, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the Polish Home Army started a giant uprising. They thought they would only have to fight for a few days before the Soviet army arrived to help. But the help never came. The city was left to fight the Nazis all by themselves for 63 days. It was a battle where everyone was a soldier. Children worked as messengers, crawling through the dark, smelly sewers to deliver orders. Women, known as menarki, handled explosives and fought in the streets. The Nazis were incredibly cruel during this time. In one neighborhood called Wola, they killed 50,000 innocent people in just a few days just to scare the rest of the city into giving up. But the city didn't give up. They fought until they had no more food and no more bullets. When the uprising finally ended in October 1944, the people were forced to leave their homes. This made Hitler so angry that he gave a final, terrible order. He said that Warsaw must be wiped off the map forever. The systematic erasure. After the people were driven out, Warsaw became a city of ghosts. For 3 months, the Nazis sent in special teams called destruction squads. Their only job was to blow up every single building that was still standing. They didn't just bomb the city. They went from house to house with flamethrowers and dynamite. They focused on the things that made Poles proud. They blew up the royal castle, the heart of the nation. They destroyed the libraries and the ancient churches. They wanted to make sure that even if Poland came back, it would have no history left to remember. By January 1945, 85% of the city on the left side of the river was gone. There were 22 million cubic meters of rubble everywhere. If you tried to move all that rubble on trains, it would have taken 20 years just to get it out of the city. But even in this desert of bricks, something was moving. Deep in the basements, a few people were still alive. While the Nazis were blowing up the city, about 1,000 people were hiding in the ruins. They were called the Robinsons of Warsaw, named after Robinson Crusoe on his deserted island. Most of them were Jewish people who were too afraid to leave because they knew they would be killed. They lived in secret bunkers and basements, sometimes for months, through the freezing winter. Their lives were terrifying. They had to be perfectly quiet. No talking, no coughing, and no sneezing. If a German patrol heard a sound from underground, they would throw a grenade into the basement. They survived on tinned food, old potatoes, and rainwater. One of these people was a famous pianist named Władysław Szpilman. He survived because a German officer actually helped him hide at the very end. When the city was finally freed in January 1945, these Robinsons crawled out of the ground. They were pale and thin, looking like ghosts in a dead city. When the new government arrived in 1945, they were horrified. There was no electricity, no water, and every bridge across the river was gone. The city was just a pile of bricks. They seriously talked about moving the capital to Krakow, which was still beautiful and hadn't been destroyed. But the people of Warsaw didn't wait for a government decision. They started walking back to the ruins on their own. They cleared the bricks with their bare hands. They set up tiny shops in the shells of buildings. Seeing this, the government realized they had no choice. They had to rebuild. They created the Bureau Odbudowy Stolicy, or the BOS, the Bureau for the Reconstruction of the capital. But they had a massive problem. How do you rebuild a historic old town when all the plans and photos have been burned? How do you make it look real again? The answer came from a set of paintings that were 200 years old. Back in the 1700s, an Italian artist named Bernardo Bellotto lived in Warsaw. He was the court painter for the King of Poland. He had painted 22 incredibly detailed views of the city. Bellotto was special because his paintings were as accurate as photographs. He used a device called a camera obscura to trace the buildings perfectly, showing every window, every brick, and every little decoration. During the war, these paintings had been stolen by the Nazis, but they survived. When the architects started the rebuild, they brought these paintings out. They looked at the colors of the walls and the shapes of the roofs in the paintings to figure out how to put the city back together. Because of these 200-year-old paintings, the architects decided to rebuild the old town exactly as it was during its golden age. It was a crazy idea. No other city in Europe was trying to recreate its past like this. But it worked. Rising from the rubble. The rebuilding was a job for the whole country. The slogan was, "The whole nation builds its capital." People worked 50 million unpaid hours to clear the ruins. Since they didn't have money to buy new materials, they had to recycle the old city. They cleaned millions of bricks by hand and used them to build new walls. They even invented a new type of concrete made from crushed rubble called gruzobeton. But they still didn't have enough bricks. So, the government made a controversial decision. They started taking bricks from other cities like Wrocław and Szczecin. These cities had been German before the war and were also ruined. The government sent teams to pull down buildings that could have been fixed just to send the bricks to Warsaw. In Wrocław, they were taking 1 million bricks every single day. It helped save Warsaw, but it meant those other cities stayed in ruins for much longer. As the city grew, the planners wanted to build big new roads to make Warsaw modern. But sometimes, the old buildings were in the way. One of the most amazing things happened in 1962, with the Church of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The church was right in the middle of where a new highway needed to go. Instead of tearing it down, they decided to move it. They cut the whole 6,800-ton brick church off its foundations and put it on rollers. In the middle of the night, on December 1st, workers used manual winches to pull the church, 21 meters backward. It moved at a speed of only 9 centimeters per minute. People stood in the cold and watched in silence as the huge building slowly slid across the ground. Not a single crack appeared in the walls, and the lights inside stayed on the whole time. It was the first time in Europe that a brick church had ever been moved like that. It was a sign that in Warsaw, nothing was impossible. While the old town was being built to look like the past, the center of the city was becoming something completely different. Poland was now under the control of the Soviet Union. Stalin wanted to leave his mark on the city, so he sent over 3,000 workers to build a gift for the Polish people, the Palace of Culture and Science. It is a massive tower that stands 237 meters tall. At the time, many Warsavians didn't like it because it reminded them of Soviet power. They even joked that the best view of Warsaw was from the top of the palace because that was the only place where you couldn't see the building itself. But it was built to last, with over 3,000 rooms, theaters, and museums. Today, it is one of the most famous parts of the city's skyline, a giant stone reminder of a complicated time. By 1955, the old town was mostly finished. When people walked into the market square, they couldn't believe their eyes. It looked like the 18th century again. The colors, the statues, and the narrow streets were all there, just as they had been 200 years ago. But it was all a careful replica. In 1980, UNESCO did something they had never done before. They put the Warsaw Old Town on their list of World Heritage Sites. Usually, they only list things that are very old and original. But they made an exception for Warsaw because the rebuilding was a masterpiece of human spirit. They called it an outstanding example of a near-total reconstruction. The city that was supposed to be dead had become a model for the rest of the world. Today, Warsaw is a thriving, modern metropolis with over 1.8 million people. It has skyscrapers that are even taller than Stalin's palace, a modern metro system, and beautiful green parks everywhere. But if you look closely at the hills in the city, like the Warsaw Uprising mound, you are looking at the 1944 ruins covered in grass. The city is literally built on top of its own past. Warsaw is often called the Phoenix City because it rose from the ashes. It is a place that proves that you can blow up the buildings, you can tear down the walls, and you can burn the libraries, but you can never destroy the soul of a people who love their home. The city that had to be rebuilt didn't just come back. It came back stronger. Warsaw's story is a reminder to all of us that no matter how dark things get or how much is lost, there is always a way to rebuild. It takes time, it takes millions of bricks, and it takes a lot of heart. But as the people of Poland showed the world, it is never truly the end. Warsaw is living, proof that hope can be built stone by stone.